Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the Roland Jupiter 7. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we have the Roland MKS-80, or AKA the Roland Jupiter 7, the long lost, often misunderstood other Jupiter that no one can quite figure out what it is. Is it a Jupiter 6? Is it a Jupiter 8? Is it both? So today we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of, is it worth it? Is the MKS-80 a super budget Jupiter 6 or Jupiter 80? You can find them for a couple $1,000s, whereas the Jupiter 6 and Jupiter 8 are both in the plus $5,000. I think Jupiter 6s are going for 7 to 8 right now, and Jupiter 8s are going for upwards of 15 to 20. So is the MKS-80 just an incredible value Jupiter and it's a combination piece, or what is it? So let's talk about it. The Roland MKS-80 was a rack mount version. It was called the Super Jupiter, and really the best way to understand it, in my opinion, is it's kind of a little bit of both and a little bit of neither. It's not really a Jupiter 6, it's not really a Jupiter 8. It's something that is part of that lineage, but actually takes it further in some ways than either the 8 or 6 ever went. The real nuts and bolts of it, where the sonic differences come, are in its filter and its VCOs. And I'm specifically talking about the Rev 5. So there's multiple revisions, but the ones that are talked about the most are Rev 4 and Rev 5, and they have different VCOs and VCFs. So the basic oscillator and filter in the Rev 4 and Rev 5 are different, and I have not played a 4, so I can't tell you how big a difference that makes, but knowing the components that are used in the Rev 4 and Rev 5 from other synths, I would guess that it does make a difference. So in the Rev 4, it uses the same oscillators that you find in the Jupiter 6, the SEM, I think 3340s, and it has an IR3109 filter, but the IR3109 filter is implemented differently than in the Jupiter 6. In the Jupiter 6, you have a filter that has got a low pass, band pass, and high pass, and they're all resonant. In the MKS-80, you just have a low pass resonant filter, and you also have a secondary high pass filter that's non-resonant. So that's a pretty big difference. The implementation of the filter really changes the tone and character of the MKS-80, in my opinion. The oscillators are the same, so I think they have similar qualities. Again, I haven't played with them, but a side note, and I'll try and link below the webpage that I found this on. I can't verify it myself, but it's an interesting kind of anecdote. I love to hear other people's thoughts on it, but apparently on the SEM chips, Roland would grade them. They'd mark them with a red dot or a white dot, and the red dot ones were noted for having better bass response, and the white dots did not. And the red dot ones went into the SH-101 and the Jupiter 6, and the white dot ones went into the MKS-80, among other synths. So interesting note, so maybe it wasn't the same SEM chips in those two. It's component differences, kind of grading differences, but interesting note. I don't know, again, I can't verify this, but I thought it was interesting, I'd share it. So that's the MKS-4, and then the MKS-5 has completely different VCOs. It has, I think it's called a IR3R03, an IR3R03, and that is a VCO that Roland created. So it's Roland's own VCO, and they only used it, as far as I know, in the MKS-80. So that's pretty interesting. They're kind of rare chips, so it's kind of a bummer if it goes out on an MKS-80 because they're expensive and hard to find since it wasn't in production for a long time. And in addition to that, it used the filter from the JX10 and the JX8P. So the JX series, it used the IR3R05 filter. So completely different components for the filter and the VCOs in the Rev 5, and that's what we have here today. So on a basic kind of where the basic sound comes from, the oscillator and the filters, you have pretty different componentry in there. So in that way, in my opinion, this is a Jupiter 7. It isn't a Jupiter 6, it isn't a Jupiter 8. From its kind of core building blocks of sound, you have a very different configuration, more so in the Rev 5 than the Rev 4, but even on the Rev 4, it's pretty different from its filter standpoint than the Jupiter 6. So in addition to that, when you get into the architecture and kind of the modulation capabilities and the different editing parameters that you can have access to, you again find a lot of differences. In this way, the MKS-80 is a lot closer to a Jupiter 6, and it is but it has a few things that none of the Jupiters have besides it, and none of the analog Jupiters, I should say. The thing that it has aftertouch and velocity sensitivity, which is a big deal. It was very common for synths in the later 80s to begin to have these, and so this is the only analog Jupiter with aftertouch and velocity sensitivity that can be routed a number of places, which make people really love it and think it's really nice to have those expression capabilities in the MKS-80. It's one of the reasons people love it. It lacks an arpeggiator, which is kind of a bummer, but with a good MIDI controller, you can get the ARP capabilities back into it. It also has something that the Jupiter 8 has that the Jupiter 6 lacks. It has upper and lower independent outs, so you can take advantage of stereo kind of when you're running dual or split patches, you can play with stereo effects. The Jupiter 6 lacked that. The Jupiter 8 had it, and a lot of people don't love the fact that the Jupiter 6 didn't have the stereo outs for the upper and lower patches when you were doing a dual or split mode. It's a pretty powerful feature in the Jupiter 8. So it's kind of a blend. One other thing it lacks from the Jupiter 6, from kind of a editability standpoint, is you can't select multiple waveforms at the same time, which is kind of a drag. So you get a lot of the Jupiter 6, you get a lot of the Jupiter 8, but you don't get it all, and you also get more. So kind of confusing. I can understand why people are confused about it. Other than that, it works a lot like a Jupiter 6 from an editing standpoint. I think you get you can invert the envelopes when you're routing them into different areas in the parameters. But other than that, it's very much from a editing standpoint, very much like a Jupiter 6, more so than the Jupiter 8. But sonically, I think it's unique. It definitely excels, the Rev 5 at least, in pads and kind of strings, much like the JX series. I think it's a little more direct and in your face, and the envelopes are a little faster than in the JX series. But it definitely excels at pads and kind of ambient and string tones, I think, personally, as I've played it. I haven't had a ton of time to get deep into it, and I'm going to spend more time, might make a follow-up video. But those are that's kind of how I understand this, and I see so much misinformation on this, so I hope this helps when you're trying to see, is the MKS-80 a good value? Is it a Jupiter 6? Is it a Jupiter 8? What am I buying? So hopefully that helps. It was kind of hard for me to find information on how successful it was and who exactly used it, because it's kind of muddled up with the Jupiter 6 and Jupiter 8 and a lot of the commentary. So let's take a listen, and then we'll wrap up with my thoughts on, is this a good investment? Is it worth it? So there you have it, the MKS-80. I'm still getting familiar with it. I just got it in last night, so I apologize if the patches weren't particularly interesting or the playing. I promise I'll make a follow-up video trying to showcase it a little bit more strongly. But here's my thoughts about whether or not it's worth it today. I do think it's a lot less expensive than the Jupiter 6 and the Jupiter 8, and it really is very close to the Jupiter experience when you're using it. It's not either of those. It doesn't, to me, sound quite like either of those, but it does a lot of sounds that are very close to both. And really, it's not, doesn't lean in one direction or the other. It kind of is in the middle, and you can get interesting sounds that sometimes are a little more Jupiter 6-y or a little more Jupiter 80, but it's really a Jupiter 7. It's really in the middle. And I think that's interesting from a kind of collection standpoint. There isn't, as far as I know, a lot of VSTs about this. With, I mean, a lot of VSTs emulating the MKS-80, and I don't think any clones are going to happen anytime soon. I'd imagine clones of the Jupiter 6 and 8 would happen before an MKS-80, just because it's a little more obscure than its kind of cousins, the Jupiter 6 and Jupiter 8. From a sonic standpoint, I like it. It does remind me of a lot of the same kind of strengths that the JX series has. So I don't know if it's, I'm still getting to know it, but I don't know if I think that it is worth 3 or 4 times as much as a JX10, for instance. But it is unique, and it does have its own kind of tonal palette. So I'm kind of split personally about whether or not I think it's a good investment from a sound standpoint. I'm still learning it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. From a collectability standpoint, I think it probably will go up in value like all the kind of vintage analog synths, and this one hasn't gone insanely through the roof for what it is. When Juno 60s are going for the same price as an MKS-80 with a controller, I think that this is definitely a better buy than a lot of the other analog kind of vintage synths on the market today for what it is and the fact that it's part of the analog Jupiter family. So that's kind of my thoughts about those two things. We're going to do a follow-up video where we do a kind of ABC comparison with the Jupiter 8 and the Jupiter 6 to kind of show off what is unique about each of those to get a better sense of how they are different and complementary in a lot of ways. So stay tuned. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments below. Please share them. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. Thank you for watching.